Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your interest in and participation in this course. This is foundation level course 5, which is how karma works. And before we dive in, um, let's think about take a moment or two to contemplate why you're here right now, and why you're here taking this course. Before we before we do any practice, it's really good to be very clear about what our motivation is so that we can direct our energy, uh, uh, all of all of the seeds, the karmic seeds we create through the action of being in this course, of listening to these teachings, of contemplating these ideas, that all of those seeds, we make them as powerful as possible. So think why you're here, make it as heartfelt and as large as you can. And now let's do the prayers. Sashi Puki Chukshing Me Tok Drum Rilara Blingshi Ninde Gempadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Uargi Drokun Namdak Shingla Druparsho Idam Guru Ratnam Mandalatam Nirya Ayami Sangye Chudam Soki Chuknam La Changchu Bardu Dakni Kapsuchi Daki Chushe Kipe Sunam Ki Drola Benshir Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chudam Soki Chuknam La Changchu Pardu Dakni Kapsuchi Daki Chushe Kipe Sunam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Druparsho Sangye Chiran Soki Chuknam Changchu Pardu Dakni Kapsuchi Daki Chushe Kipe Sunam Ki Drola Benchir Sangye Druparsho. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for your interest in this course. Thank you for allowing me to to spend time with this course again, because it's really quite wonderful, and I truly appreciate it. If you haven't been to teachings with me before, um, just to let you know that I I give the teachings like the way they were taught to me, and all of my teachers have used the Tibetan language a lot in conveying these teachings. Um, and so I spend a lot of time with these courses to find all of the Tibetan words that were used when the course was originally taught. And I do so because uh, the the most comprehensive set of the Buddhist teachings that exist on this planet exist in the language of Tibet. And that language is at grave risk of, of disappearing from our world. It's not really in use much anymore. So I'm just doing my little part to help preserve the language, and I to share the language with you. And I hope if you have an interest in the language that uh, you continue to study it. I will ask you to repeat Tibetan words, and so please do so, even though it may not. I mean, if you're in a room with other people and they're not in the class, you can just whisper it, but please at least um, voice it. I like to see lips moving when we do the Tibetan. And I will find a way to share my Tibetan document with you so that if you do have an interest in learning Tibetan, you can have this as a resource. The Tibetan sheet that's provided with the course materials is you'll find not as extensive as what I put together, because Geshe Michael used far more Tibetan words when he taught this course than show up in either the answer keys or the Tibetan sheet. Uh, so there's that. So I'll share my document with you. And again, don't freak out that it's 5 pages. Don't worry. Okay. I lost the chat. There you are. Okay, great. So let's get started. So first we'll do an overview of this course, course 5, how karma works. So that we can just be, have some grounding, what to look forward to as we continue the course together. So this course, if you've been, I don't know if anyone does this anymore, of taking these ACI courses in sequential order, starting with 1 and continuing on. But if you have, this will be your first introduction to Abhidharma. It's one of the 5 great books that are studied in monasteries. It's one of the 5 great books that are in this series of courses. And in the fourth chapter of the Abhidharma, there is a presentation of karma. And it's probably the best presentation of karma. With Jetsung Kapa's Lamrim Chenmo vying for being the best presentation. We are going to use some excerpts from Jetsung Kapa's Lamrim Chenmo throughout the course to supplement what's presented in the Abhidharma. So our first class, as is our custom in these ACI foundation courses, is to give an introduction to the topic. And we are going to introduce Abhidharma. Just so we're clear on what it is and maybe to understand some ideas of what it might not be that other people might think it is, to dissuade any confusion. And in the second class, we'll start to talk about karma. In previous courses, we've talked about how basic karma is movement of the mind and what it brings, what it inspires. And we'll be talking more about that. And then also in that class, the detailists, one of the early Indian Buddhist philosophical schools, will talk about their idea of, well, they think that there's this certain kind of physical matter that we cannot see with our eyes. Like normally we see physical matter with our eyes as color and shape. But there's this other physical matter they claim that exists that we cannot see, but it is physical. And they say it has to do with ethics or morality. And we'll talk about that. In our third class, we'll talk about different kinds of deeds, different kinds of actions, bad deeds, good deeds, what makes a deed, what makes some action we do good, what makes some action we do bad, what is motivation, and how does motivation affect what we do. In the fourth class, we're going to talk about karma and its consequences. What kind of consequences can we expect from what kind of actions? We're going to use Jetsung Kapa mostly for that. And then we'll also refer to the main commentary that we're using for the Abhidharma by the first Dalai Lama. In the fifth class, we're going to talk about how is it, like if it's true, and if you took course 4, the foundation series, the proof of future lives, if it's true that we have beginningless past lives and beginning and endless future lives, how is it that karma, how is it that the karmic seeds that we plant through our actions of body, speech, and mind carry with us? How do they stay? How is it that a result can come after this particular bag of bones and personality is gone? How can a result come? And Jetson Kappa talks about this in his extraordinary book called Gompo Ropsal. And this is from the mind-only school perspective on how karma is carried in our minds. And for the most part, what is held by the mind-only school with regard to carrying karma is accepted by the higher philosophical schools. And the higher schools also accept what the Abhidharma, most of what the Abhidharma says or describes about karma. So that's one of the reasons why we go to Abhidharma for karma. So anyway, in the 5th class, we'll be talking about how our karmic seeds carried from life to life. In our 6th class, one of the most important notions, at least for me, the most profound teaching is Jetson Kappa's presentation of the relationship between karma and emptiness. That, or lack of a self nature, that things aren't what they are from their own side. That things are not coming at you, but coming from you. And there's a relationship between that process of things coming from us and karma. And it's really the whole key to living these teachings in our lives and using them to escape from the suffering we find ourselves in. So we're going to cover that idea from the monastic textbooks from Sarah May, which is the lineage, the college in our lineage. The 7th class, we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about in the, the 3rd class about good deeds and bad deeds. But in the 7th class, we're going to talk about something called black karma and white karma. And this very important concept to help make our actions as powerful as possible to create the most powerful seeds we can. We're going to talk about the path of karma. We'll talk about the 10 root non-virtues in that class as well. In the 8th class, am I going too fast? Are we okay? Okay, good. So in the 8th class, we're going to talk about a concept called most basic virtue. the the storehouse, if you will, of virtue within your consciousness, within your stream of consciousness. And there's a way with certain actions that you can destroy that collection of virtue. And it's very important that we avoid doing that, because it takes a lot of powerful good karma. We have to create a very large collection of good karma, of good deeds, in order to reach our highest goals, in order to see emptiness, even in order to see how it is, even to see that process of us labeling of things ripening from our karmic seeds into our experience. Even to see that takes a huge amount of good karma. So we have to be careful and not destroy it. We're also going to talk in that class about projecting karma and finishing karma. We're going to talk about the different ways that the results of karma manifest, the different kinds of energy, if you will, that karma has. In our 9th class, we're going to talk about the 5 immediate misdeeds. I think we've talked about that in previous classes, if you've taken previous classes. These are deeds that are so powerful that negatively powerful, that they must ripen in your next life. And like there's no opportunity for any of those positive seeds in your collection of virtue that could ripen into a happy rebirth. Those who create those immediate misdeeds will be born in the hells in their next life. And the hells are not a place that we want to be. I mean, we think this can be bad here with, all the war and stealing and deception and all the things that go on in our lives, but hell is tremendously worse. One of the most powerful of those immediate misdeeds is this idea of creating a schism in the community of those who are following these teachings. We cannot technically do this action now. The full version of this immediate misdeed is breaking up the actual community of monks of a Buddha. So the Buddha for us existed, over 2,500 years ago. We can't do this now. But we can do Jetumpa. We can do something that is similar to that. And we'll talk about that as well. That the difference between doing something that is like a complete action and one that is not complete. So it creates a less powerful seed, but still either negative or positive, depending on what the action is that you're doing. And then in the last class, we'll talk about which of the negative actions are most serious and what makes an action more or less serious, and what makes a positive action more or less positive. Um, even if we could, if we just spent our times doing only positive actions, we could not do all the positive actions that are possible for us to do. So we'll talk about the importance of prioritizing. Prioritizing our practice, our purposeful practice of these teachings to create the highest result, and to create that as quickly as possible. So that's a quick look at what it is we're going to cover in this course. So Abhidharma. Say Ch Ngumpa. Ch Ngumpa. We'll break this down in a little bit. But Abhidharma, it's one of the very first forms of Buddhism that came onto our planet in India 100 years ago. I mean, after the Buddha had passed, it came about during what they call the Third Council. So in the first few hundred years after the Buddha passed into what they call parinirvana, his students got together and were like, okay, we really have to preserve these teachings. And let's talk about that. You know, what did you hear? What did you hear once I heard these teachings? So this early council of Buddhism, some people call it Hinayana. Sometimes you'll hear it as Theravada. Those are both Sanskrit words. In Tibetan, it's talked about, why is it called Hinayana? Which means lower vehicle. It's Tekpa in Tibetan means vehicle. And Tekpa means capacity. Vehicle as in something that, transports you from one place to another. And what is the capacity of that vehicle? If we're talking about a truck, what is the capacity of the truck? Can it hold just a few boxes, or can it hold tons of material? So this Hinayana is related to the motivation of the person. And the motivation of lower capacity person just means that their capacity is to take themselves to freedom, to through their own practice, to reach nirvana, to escape from the cycle of suffering. And a person who has done that is called an arhat. Just by way of contrast, the greater vehicle, the Mahayana, is doing these practices for the purpose of reaching total, complete enlightenment in order to benefit all other living beings. So that vehicle contains every possible living being that there is. Where the Hinayana vehicle contains one person. So that's the difference in motivation between the two. So just in case it ever comes up, and for me, this hasn't come up, but more than maybe twice in almost 30 years now, is that there were 18 different divisions of this early Indian philosophical school. This third council had 18 divisions. And the one that we're studying is the Sarvastivadin tradition. And I'll put that in the chat. Just in case, just so you see it, and just so in case it comes up again in the future. So, the main book that we use for studying Abhidharma and this is true. I'm sorry, I'm babysitting a cat and she's exhibiting some sickness right now. So I'm just going to lean down and pet her if that's okay. Okay, sweetheart. That's a good girl. Okay, thank you. So this text that we're using, it's used by all the different, and I just listed them here for you, all the different Tibetan schools or sects of Tibetan Buddhism. Sakya, Gelugpa, Kagyu, Nyingma. They all use this text. And this text is called, in Sanskrit, Abhidharma Kosha. Say Abhidharma Kosha. Abhidharma Kosha. In Tibetan, it's Che Ngumpa Z. Che Ngumpa Z. So this is the main text that we're going to use as our root text. And the author of this text is Master Vasubandhu. And in Tibetan, oops, I see a mistake. I'll have to fix that. In Tibetan, his name is Lopen. So you can, Lopen, that's correct. Yikmyan. I forgot the K here. There should be a K right after that I. Yik Yiknyan. It's a tongue twister.
Okay, bye bye.
Yiknyan. We had a little interlude there of some different languages. So Master Vasubandhu, he does anyone know? I mean, we've talked about him before. Does anyone know who his half brother is?
Master
You can
Asanga.
answer in the chat or yes, Asanga. Thank you. He's the half brother of Asanga, and their story, if you haven't yet heard, or if you have, then you get to hear it again, is that his mother was a nun, a Buddhist nun, and she had an extraordinary practice. She was no doubt a realized being. She had clairvoyance, and she saw that in her time, which we're talking the year 350 of the current era. And what year are we in? Anyway, she saw in her time that Buddhism was in decline. And she saw that if she had children, that they would become the greatest masters of the Buddhist teachings. So she purposely gave up her vows. She had one son by a king and another son by a Brahmin, a spiritual sage master. And those two did become the most greatest scholars of Buddhism ever. If you don't include Arya Asanga and Jason Kappa. Kitchen has come to talk to me. She may jump on my lap, which is a good sign because she's been sick and hiding. Oh, sweetheart. Okay, so they wrote most of the books that are studied in the monastery. They're very, Asanga went and studied directly with Maitreya and wrote 5 great books. And Vasubandhu is responsible for the Abhidharma. So we said that Abhidharma is Hinayana, is lower vehicle. So the question comes, is Master Sangha a Hinayana follower? And they say, no, he was not. But scholars are like, well, wait a minute, he wrote this book from the Hinayana perspective, and it's brilliant. He must have been Hinayana. But but he was not just Hinayana, he was also Mahayana. And we'll talk more about that later. So again, he and Asanga, of course, were alive around 350 current era. We don't have their exact dates. And in fact, there's some like scholarly controversy about how many Vasubandhus there actually were. That's how little we know about them. Because Master Vasubandhu also wrote on the Mahayana. If like in the book that I'm translating now called Interlude on Emptiness, we had a whole section of the book that we finished on the mind only school. And Kedrje, the author of that book, often quotes Master Vasubandhu's works on the mind only school, which is a Mahayana tradition, a great vehicle tradition. So anyway, Geshe Michael said that Master Vasubandhu probably wrote the Abhidharma Kosha as a confession for having put down Hinayana, for having made the mistake of putting down the Hinayana. So this text, if someone were to ask you, what are you studying? It's commonly known just as, among Tibetans anyway, just as Z. So if someone asks you, you can say Z, or you can say kosha. And everyone will know, well, Tibetans or Sanskritists will know that you're studying Master Vasubandhu's text on the Abhidharma. So Abhidharma, let's see, did I get these kind of confused? Well, we'll talk about the meaning of the words Abhidharma and Kosha. So Abhi, or Lunpa in Tibetan, this part of Abhidharma Kosha, that means up to or approaching something. And it comes from the root dur, the Sanskrit root dur, which means to hold something or to keep something. I'm sorry, dharma comes from dur, not abhi. That's silly. Abhi means up to, and dharma, or che in Tibetan, that comes from dur, which means to hold or to keep. So che is one of these words that has many different meanings. And so we have to think about the context of its use. It can mean teaching, like, oh, I'm going to a Dharma talk. It can mean thing. It can mean all things. It can mean in debate. It has the meaning of a quality. So it can have many different meanings. And the way we mainly talk about it in this course is as existing thing or phenomenon. Arangingo Zimpe Ni Che. An existing thing is Rangingo Zimpe, is anything which has a nature. Anything which which holds its own nature, which has its own identity. And that's why dharma, existing thing, comes from dur. Now, you're probably, if you've been studying for a while, you might be sort of wondering why we're talking about things holding their own nature. That might sound like there's something incorrect about that. And we have to remember that we are in the Abhidharma is in the philosophical school known as the detailists, the Vaibhashikas, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so just remember, when you receive teachings, it's very good to ask, what point of view do these teachings come from? Or what philosophical school accepts these teachings? And so remember, right now, we are in Abhidharma land. We are in the detailist school point of view. So that's the hat we're wearing. So dharma or ch means existing thing. They call dharma can be, dharma, the dharma that is taught, the dharma that you're studying. It's called dharma because it holds you from a lower birth. And that's why it's dharma. It holds you away from the lower realms. And that's the function of dharma as teaching. But mainly in this course, we're going to talk about dharma as meaning existing thing. And anything is dharma. My eyeglasses are dharma. My computer monitor is dharma. The chair I'm sitting on is dharma. My excitement is dharma. Everything is dharma. Any existing thing is a dharma. Now, what's the highest dharma? Does anyone have a guess of what the highest existing thing is? We have a couple of nirvanas here. Very good. If we're in the lower school, the lower vehicle, it would be nirvana, would be the highest existing thing. If we were in the Mahayana school, studying a Mahayana text, the highest thing would be complete and total enlightenment, Buddhahood. So it's great that that you guys caught which school we're in. Yay! So the highest thing in Abhidharma is nirvana. Now, Abhi or Lumpa means up to. So Abhidharma is the thing that takes you up to nirvana. Or I should say, and it brings nirvana to you. They explain it both ways. The thing that takes you to nirvana and the thing that brings nirvana to you is Abhidharma. And what is the thing that would take you to nirvana in English? What is it of what we study that we use in our practice will bring us to freedom from suffering. Yeah, understanding selflessness. Thank you, Jessica. So it's the knowledge of emptiness, of selflessness. And Jessica was very careful to say selflessness and not emptiness, because it's this school primarily uses the word selflessness instead of the word emptiness. The different philosophical schools have different ideas about what selflessness means, and they use slightly different words to describe it. It's not that a detailist or that Master Vasubandhu, when he's talking from this point of view, would never use the word tongpani or emptiness. That's not true. But he would use the word takme, which is an absence of a self nature. It's just a different word, that's all. And people have different ideas about what those words mean, and that's important to understand. So anyway, Abhidharma means wisdom. It means the knowledge of emptiness, the knowledge of selflessness. So if someone asks you, what's Abhidharma? You say wisdom. And they ask you, well, what kind of wisdom? Could be wisdom about many different things, right? The wisdom that understands selflessness. So Abhidharma means sharab, which means wisdom. But just to be confusing for everyone, this book its title is translated as we're going to get to it in just a second, but the treasure house of highest knowledge. So sharab is used here as knowledge, even though it is a word for wisdom. But there are many different words in Sanskrit and Tibetan for this idea of understanding high concepts. Whereas in English, for example, we don't have many, and there's probably a good reason for that. But anyway, generally, sharab means wisdom, and Abhidharma means wisdom. So kosha or dz, it means a treasure or a treasure house, a treasury. Like in the Utpala palace, there was a pangzi, which is the national treasure. That's where all of a country's gold and jewels and precious gems are kept. So why is this book called a kosha? Why is this book called a treasure house? Because this book contains all the jewels. So what are the jewels? The jewels, there were originally 7 great books on Abhidharma. And they were written down, or not written down, but spoken by the very first disciples of the Buddha. So people like Shariputra and Katyayani Putra, these people composed the first books on the Buddhist teachings, on Abhidharma. And so Master Vasubandhu collected these 7 books and put them into his book. So that's why his book is called The Treasure House of the Abhidharma. The Abhidharma Kosher. The treasure house that contains the precious jewels of all the information from those early Buddhist texts. So the school of thought that the Abhidharma belongs to, in Sanskrit, it's called Vaibhashika. But in English, we call it detailist. And so this book, the Abhidharma Kosha, is found in the collection of the Buddhist canon has 3 major collections, at least the Tibetan Buddhist canon, and one of them is called the Tengyur. The Tengyur. The Kangyur, that's another collection. Kangyur, that means words spoken by the Buddha. So the Kangyur contains all the sutras spoken by the Buddha. The Tengyur contains all the Tenchu, all the commentaries on the Buddha's words. So does it contain every single commentary ever written? No, it contains, this is from ancient India. So we're talking early commentators to the Buddhist teachings. There's another collection for when Buddhism finally got to Tibet sometime later, then this canon of Buddhist commentary commenting on both the Buddhist teachings and on the Indian commentators. So Abhidharma Kosha is in the Tengyur. It's a Shastra is the Sanskrit word, Tenchu. And if you go to the mixed nuts, you may recall that we had quite a discussion about what makes something the word of the Buddha or a commentary on the word of the Buddha, a Tenchu. We had quite a discussion about that in the text that Tim Lonehout is translating. So let's just briefly go through these Buddhist philosophical schools very quickly. You don't have to remember this for homework or anything like that, just to introduce these words to you in case you hear them again, which most likely you will. So we're not talking, when we talk about Buddhist philosophical schools, we're not talking about those Tibetan sects that I talked about earlier. We're not talking about Nyingmas and Sakyas and Kagyus and Galupas. No, we're talking about the philosophical schools that originated in India in the, like, let's say the first millennia of the Buddhist teachings on the planet. So the first one is called Vaibhashika, or detailist. The second one is called Sautantrika, or sutrists, those who follow the sutras. This is where logic teachings can be found, is in this particular school. Then we've got a school with two different names, Yogacharya or Chittamatra, and that's the mind-only school. And then there's the Madhyamika, which is the middle way school. So there are four schools from early Buddhism. So the school that we're in is the detailist school, or the Vaibhashikas. And why were they called detailists? Because they like to study this book called Chedrakta Shepa, which means an explanation in detail. And these early Indian Buddhist practitioners really love this book about detailists. So that's how they got your name. And this is talked about in your reading. And then the sutrists, the Sautrantika, they weren't so keen on these lists of things because they thought it was all just made up by people. And so they followed the word of the Buddha and nothing else. Nobody else's idea about what the Buddha said. In the mind-only school, we will talk about this later in the course when we talk about how karma is carried. But they have this idea about that there is a consciousness, a type of consciousness called a foundation consciousness that holds your karmic seeds. And that's how your karma is carried from life to life. And then the middle way school has two different branches, the independence branch, or the Svatrantika, and the Prasangika, or consequence branch. But we're not going to get into them in this course. So it's important to keep in mind when we talk about different philosophical schools that Buddha taught all of them. The Buddha taught each of them. And they each serve a purpose. The schools may not agree with each other about what the Buddha's teachings mean. And there are great debates between followers of these different philosophical schools. But these debates are all very important for us as, present day students to better understand how it is that we, in our day-to-day life, make mistakes with regard to what it is that we are experiencing, and why we experience what we experience, and what selflessness, what emptiness means, and how we can use that to correct our misunderstandings. So the Buddha taught these different schools because of who was in the room when he was teaching. And that's an important thing to not share teachings that maybe a person would not be able to handle. So that the teachings, in a way, progress from more gross but not ugly, but more that things have more substance, to the very highest school. Nothing has any nature of its own. So there's a gradation between gross and very, very subtle. So one person can be led through these different schools to the higher understanding. But it's just to say that each of these philosophical schools has very important value for us as practitioners in the current day. And while each of the schools may not agree on what selflessness means, there are many things on which they do agree. And one example from the detailist school, the Vaibhashika, is morality. That's where we find the Vinaya, or the vowed morality, the teachings on vowed morality. And all practitioners, really, not just monks and nuns, but all practitioners have those values of morality that come from the teachings in the detailist school. So the main text that we're going to use as our commentary on the Zi, on the kosha, on the treasure house, is called Zutik Tarlam Selje. Zutik just means commentary on the Zi, commentary on the treasure house. Tarlam, that means, tar means tarpa, moksha, which means freedom. Lam means path. So Tarlam is the path to freedom. And Selje means illumination. So this text, this main commentary that we're going to use on the kosha, on the treasure house, is called Illumination on the Path to Freedom. Excuse me. And this book was written by Gyalwa Gendendru. And he was a student of Tsongkhapa, and he was the first Dalai Lama. uh, and why are we using a commentary and not directly the root text? Because the root text, the Abhidharma Kosha, was written like a poem for memorization. So it's very succinct, and we need a commentary. We need someone who has received teachings on it to help us understand what this very curse poetry means. Like Master Vasubandhu would say, like, the 5 work towards the 4, and the 3 act towards the 3, and the 4 affect the 7. And it's like, well, what the heck does that mean? 5 what? 4 what? 3 what? We need someone to help us understand what it was that Master Vasubandhu was saying. So we're using the first Dalai Lama's commentary, Gyalwa Gendin Drup. Gyalwa means Buddha or victorious one, and Gendun Drup is just his name. His dates were 1391 to 1474. So if you like compare his dates to Tsongkhapa, who was his teacher, you notice that he met Tsongkhapa probably more towards the end of Tsongkhapa's life. And so he was probably in his 30s or 40s when he met Tsongkhapa. And his story is really beautiful. He was born in a Dokpa, which is a peasant camp. There's a group of people in Tibet who travel from place to place. They have no permanent home. Wanderers, travelers, many of them yak herders. But they were attacked. His family was attacked by bandits, and his mother put him in a cradle and left him out in the wilderness somewhere, and to protect him so he wouldn't get killed by the bandit. And a big, huge bird came and protected him. So Gyalwa Gendin Drup, the first Dalai Lama, he founded one of the 4 major monasteries of the Gelugpa sect in Tibet, and it's called Tashi Limpo. The other ones are called Drepung, Ganden, and Sera. But you don't have to know that, and you really don't have to know that he founded Tashi Limpo either. But just so that you know. I'm spending too much time on small details. I need to hurry up, Utpala. So hold on, let me see where I can jump to. Okay, let's jump to the literal meaning of Abhidharma. So, as we talked about, Abhidharma mainly refers to wisdom, right? Now, there are 2 kinds of Abhidharma. There's wisdom or knowledge or higher knowledge, Abhi, and there's Chedrong which literally means something that hangs onto something else, like followers or accessories. So it's Abhidharma literally refers to higher knowledge and its accessories, the accessories to higher knowledge. So let's talk about what is actual knowledge. So mainly, actual knowledge is that which brings us to our goal, right? That wisdom, that knowledge, which brings us to our goal, which we've talked about, is nirvana, freedom from suffering. That's our goal in this school. And when we talk about the 5 paths, and here path does mean an understanding, a wisdom. This knowledge, this wisdom mainly refers to the last 3 of the 5 paths. So the 5 paths are the last 3 are the path of seeing. This is where one sees emptiness directly or selflessness directly. The path of habituation or meditation, where you become familiar with what it is you saw directly. And then the path of no more learning, which is when you achieve the goal, freedom from suffering. So when the Abhidharma Kosha talks about Abhidharma, the actual knowledge is these 3 higher paths: path of seeing, path of habituation, and path of no more learning. This is real knowledge. This is actual wisdom. The accessories to knowledge, those are, we could call them a lower kind of wisdom. They're not a wisdom that directly leads us out of, directly takes us out of the wheel of suffering. But they're still important, important to us getting to that kind of wisdom, right? So just for an example, they're the three kinds of wisdom. You may have heard this phrase, tu som gom, which is listening to Dharma teachings, some thinking about Dharma teachings, and gom, meditating on Dharma teachings. Tu som gom. So the wisdom that comes from listening to teachings, the wisdom that comes from contemplating these teachings, and the wisdom that comes from meditating on these teachings. And this is before you reach the 3rd path. So these are on the lower paths, path of accumulation or path of preparation, where you are basically gathering knowledge. You're learning the teachings, you're contemplating them, you're working to get them in your heart through meditation, you're working to live them in your life. So these 3 are all accessories to knowledge. Another accessory to knowledge would be, if you took the last course with me on meditation, would be the different stages of meditative concentration that you develop. So there are many different levels of meditation, and those are not wisdom in and of themselves, but they are accessories to wisdom, because you must reach a particular state of meditation in order to see selflessness directly, to be on the third path, to become an Arya. Another accessory to wisdom is this thing I mentioned earlier, that Abhidharmas say that there's a kind of morality that's physical, even though we can't see it. So the other accessory to wisdom is, when you are in a deep state of meditation, you're not able to break your morality. You can't break any vows you've taken with regard to actions of body or speech. You could only think negative thoughts, but you'd be avoiding 7 of the 10 misdeeds. And we'll get into the misdeeds later, but 7 of them are related to actions of body and speech. So when you're in a deep state of meditation, you are protected from breaking all of those vows, and that is considered an accessory to knowledge. Then there are things that are just accessories to knowledge in name only. So nominal accessories to knowledge. And these would be the books that we're studying, the words printed on the page. This whole class on Abhidharma, the words spoken, it's not an accessory to knowledge, but it's close to being an accessory to knowledge. There are things you can use to get to accessories to knowledge, right? You attend teachings, you read books, so that maybe you get to be attracted to these ideas, and then you work on them. So we've got the actual knowledge, which is the last 3 paths: the path of seeing, the path of habituation, the path of no more learning. Then we have the accessories to knowledge, the examples of which are the knowledge you get from listening to, contemplating, and meditating on the teachings. And then there are the different meditative stages. Those are accessories to knowledge. And this protection that you have from breaking vows related to your physical being and your speech. So those are the 2 types of knowledge. So now I'm going to have to, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, so here are the 8 chapters of the book. And we won't do the Tibetan this time, because I took too long with the earlier parts. So the 8 chapters. The first chapter is a presentation on the categories of existence. Um, small subject, right? All the categories of all the things that exist, all existing things. This first chapter divides everything up into categories, but the main one that we're concerned with is the discussion about stained and unstained things. Stained means it's related to negative thoughts, negative mental affliction, sometimes it's called. Things related to our samsara, our suffering. So it's anything that's related to it or produces it or was produced by it, which basically means everything. It's very rare to come into contact with something that is unstained because of the nature of suffering, the nature of where we are, the nature of the mistake that we hold in our mind. So anything like even this glass is a stained thing. The second chapter is a presentation of the powers. And this has to do with basically our faculties of perception, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our skin, our consciousness, the way we perceive the world. It also includes mental functions, which are a description of the different kinds of like thoughts and emotions that we have. And then there's also a discussion of types of causes. There are different types of causes. And I see now it will be impossible for me to finish the 8 chapters. So let me just say in general that these 8 chapters, they have a particular flow to them in that the first chapter starts off with like, here's everything there is, and we're going to put them in categories. And then each chapter builds on the previous chapter and provides more information about the content of the previous chapter. So that is a link that you find actually in many Buddhist texts. And you find it here as well. So I apologize that I left so much uncovered, and I will finish class. So you're not going to be able to finish your homework or do your quiz, but please do the reading anyway. And then I will finish this class next time, as well as class 2. So I will be far more efficient when we meet again in 2 days. And again, I apologize that you cannot finish your homework. Well, maybe you could finish your homework because everything that I was going to say is in the reading, but it's good to get it from a teacher. So anyway, let's quickly dedicate our, uh-oh. Where'd it go? Utpala, the share impaired. There, let's quickly, oops. dedicate this class towards our highest motivation. Kewadi kewo kun sunam yeshe toksok shin sunam yeshe lejunwe tampa kuni toparsho. Okay, thank you so much. And I'll see you in a couple of days. Have a wonderful couple of days. Thank you, live translators. Thank you to ACI technical people.
Благодарю.
Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Internet. Thank you, Geshe.
Спасибо.
Okay, see you in 2 days.
Thank you. Thank you, dear teacher.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you, teacher.
Спасибо.
Thank you, teacher, so much.
Thank you, teacher.